Hi, good morning. Welcome to Power Breakfast Singapore 007. Please do take note that this is a post-recorded introductory video after Mike Robbins has presented the session. Apology to everyone including Mike that this video was delayed due to the holiday season and tight work schedule. Before we hop on to the wonderful session brought to you by Mike, I wish to first extend a warm welcome to Mike and really thank you for taking up some of the time to present a session on Power Breakfast for the Singapore PowerShell user group. Secondly, I would like to provide some of the updates that we have in the user group. As this is a post-dated introductory video, the PowerShell Saturday that was held on 20th December last year is over. Matthew and I was at Microsoft Singapore on that day where Matthew shared to the attendees that was presented on that day. On the basic recap of desired state configuration, I'm really amazed with his presentation as he brought us through the whole session just using Microsoft OneNote. Thereafter, we ran a little lab on DSC and some discussion with the attendees on how we can craft the activities for the user group in year 2015. No doubt, we have received a lot of feedback and a lot of requests. Therefore, in the new year, I'll be working with Matthew along with Benjamin to craft out new curriculum and activity for the user group. It has been a good year in 2014 where we successfully run multiple PowerShell Saturday and Power Breakfast with international renowned speakers willing to share their knowledge and expertise through link to the keen learners in Asia Pacific. So, in 2015, the user group will be reformed to have activities that suit different level of professionals and most importantly, will continue to spread the PowerShell love. Lastly, I would like to recommend you to take a look at this book, PowerShell Troubleshooting Guide, which currently I'm reviewing it and will be posting a review blog post and share to the user group through Facebook, Twitter, and MailChimp. Without further ado, I'll pass on the stage to Mike, where he'll be sharing about what is new in PowerShell version 5.
Okay, welcome to Power Breakfast number 007. My name is Mike F Robbins, and today I'll be presenting many of the new features in PowerShell version 5. The session is designed to be an overview, not a deep dive, and it's based off of a preview version of PowerShell version 5. So everything in this presentation is subject to change in the final release version of PowerShell version 5. There's a lot of new features, and actually I've been presenting this presentation for probably about 6 months now at different places, and it's kind of gotten to the point where it's hard to put all the content in one presentation because there's been multiple releases of PowerShell version 5. So there's a lot of content. So we won't cover all the features, but some of my favorite features will be covered. And some of the features we'll just mention, but many of them will demonstrate. So, the first question is PowerShell version 5 preview. How do you get it? How do you get PowerShell version 5? So it's part of the WMF5 preview. And let's talk a little bit about acronyms. You see the acronym WMF. And when I do this presentation live, I like to ask people, who knows what that acronym stands for? But we'll just go ahead and jump into it since this is an online presentation. I want to give you another acronym, and this is kind of funny. Who knows what the acronym PMS stands for? And I tell people in my audience, even if you know the answer to this, please don't shout it out. So I actually received an email from somebody who had received a fax from a support vendor. And they said they wanted the IP address of the PMS server and the PMS interface port. And I actually sent an email back to this pharmacist and said, hey, I have no idea what that stands for. Because if I do a Google search on PMS, I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to get the results of what I'm looking for. So, and what PMS stands for, it stands for Pharmacy Management System. So who knows what the acronym WMF stands for? It stands for Windows Management Framework. So PowerShell version 5 is part of the Windows Management Framework 5.0. And like it says in red there on the slide, preview versions should not be installed in production. And I've heard a few different things recently, but it really is beta software, and you don't install beta software in production because it's not supported. Let's talk a little bit about the new modules that are in the WMF5 preview. And the first preview was released in April of 2014, so that gives you an idea how long this has been out. The OneGet module is one of those, the initial modules that was released. So you can see there are a number of commandlets, and some of the names of these commandlets have changed since that release, but this is updated for the most recent preview, which was released in November. Another module is Network Switch module. You can see, I think there's like 19 commandlets that are part of that module. In the environment I work in, I support 3 data centers, and I can manage everything with PowerShell. It doesn't matter if it's the EqualLogic storage area networks or if it's our Aperture backup product, and we used to run backup at Zeg. I could manage all those products, including my Microsoft products, with PowerShell. And the one thing I couldn't manage with PowerShell was my network equipment. And with this module, and of course network gear that supports that has support for this, you'll be able to manage your network gear as well. So then there was another release in May. And in the May release, there was a PowerShell Get module, which allows you to distribute PowerShell modules. And here are the commandlets that are part of that module. And we're going to go through this pretty quick because we're going to demonstrate the majority of this. So other new modules, you can now natively create zip files and extract the contents of a zip file with PowerShell. And there's an OData module with a commandlet in it. And these are, now we're going to cover other new commandlets that are commandlets that have been added to existing PowerShell modules that existed in version 4. So you can see the module name there, and there are a number of commandlets here. Like I said, we'll go through this pretty quick. We're definitely going to demonstrate the debug job commandlet. The get item property value is kind of unique, and it's kind of a shortcut. A lot of the stuff you can do in PowerShell version 4, but maybe it was more difficult to do. And many of the new commandlets make life easier in PowerShell version 5. So convert from string is actually, that's a commandlet. You could do an entire presentation on just that commandlet. It's really amazing, and we'll just briefly demonstrate that one. If you wanted to research something from this presentation, that would be something. There are a lot of great blogs out there. Even the person on the PowerShell team that designed that particular commandlet has some blogs and videos that he's done demonstrating that. In desired state configuration, there's a few new commandlets, and I'll provide this slide deck and all the code as well, along with the video of this presentation. Okay, so now what these are actually parameters that are added to existing commandlets that already existed in PowerShell version 4. And the commandlets are not in alphabetical order, but I tried to order them in some logical fashion. And you'll see all of these commandlets actually now have a fully qualified module parameter. And it looks like this has gotten out of order here, but that's okay. The new module manifest, a lot of these parameters that have been added are actually for the PowerShell Get functionality. So save help, it also has a fully qualified module. Update help now has a confirm, a fully qualified module, and a what if. I think I reordered these and didn't step through the presentation, but we'll make the best of it. The set scheduled job has a run every, and also the registered scheduled job has that parameter as well. Now the stop service, no wait, I want to show you that one because that's one of my favorite features. Restart computer has a soft parameter. Select object has a skip last. Test DSC configuration, I'm going to demonstrate that one. That has a detailed parameter. Update DSC configuration has a throttle limit. And who is here today to learn more about PowerPoint? And who is here today to learn more about PowerShell? Hopefully it's the latter. So that means it's demo time. Okay, so we'll jump right into the presentation because just for the sake of time. Actually, for my presentation, I have prep for it. We're going to try to make this where you can see it decently. I've actually zoomed it in to 150%, so I think you'll still be able to get a fair amount on the screen, but also be able to see the font. What I did, and I got this tip from Ashley McGlone, who is a Microsoft PFE. He goes by the Goatee PFE on Twitter. I put the break keyword at the top of the script, so if I accidentally say run all, it's actually going to break at that point, so it won't run anything below that. So, and like if you selected something and you accidentally hit F5, or if you hit F5 up here to run the entire script instead of F8, it'll break it right here and it won't run anything below that point. So that's good tip for presenters. Then, you know, typically your zoom is very small and it's like impossible to see it. Okay. When the zoom changes, it looks like link count has an issue with that, but we can change that in PowerShell. So we can zoom it up to 150%. One of the new features in PowerShell version 5, and it didn't show up on my slides, but transcripts are actually now supported in version 5. So we'll go ahead and move any old transcripts I have out there, and now we'll start a transcript. So now we're going to have a transcript when we get finished with this, everything that I've run, so I'll provide that transcript. And if I wasn't already in the demo folder, we would be changing our location to the demo folder. And this presentation, it actually requires internet access, and I'll check one thing on my base machine here. I don't think I enabled internet access to this VM. Let's enable that real quick. Okay, so we'll just do, instead of doing a ping, we can just do a testnet connection. That was actually a new commandlet in PowerShell version 4. So we are able to get to the internet now. We'll go ahead and clear the screen. To give you an idea of what operating system this machine is running, it's running Windows 8.1 Enterprise Edition and the PowerShell version. We're running PowerShell version 5, build 9883. So that's it for the preparation for the demo. Now, one thing I want to bring to your attention, there's very few things on PowerShell that are case sensitive, and you see how I have these regions? If this region, if you put it in uppercase, guess what? It won't work. See, I don't have the line anymore. So the region keyword and the in region keyword are case sensitive. So it's just something to keep in mind and just an extra bonus tip. Let's talk a little bit about the OneGet module. So what OneGet is, the creator of this has told me that it's a package manager. So it's something that manages package managers. And if you're familiar with Chocolatey, you can actually download and install Chocolatey packages automatically on this machine or even a remote machine with PowerShell. And Chocolatey is the one that shipped with OneGet initially, but there's many other providers now. And you can even create your own. And one thing, if you want to know, when we get done with this, if you want to know more about OneGet, they actually, follow them on Twitter, they're at OneGet, but they have a meeting at 10 a.m. Pacific time every Friday. And this is actually an open source project, so the great thing is they tell you everything about it, since it's open source. So this gives you an idea of the commandlets, and we've seen these on our slide already. And what I did, I stuck that in a variable when I ran that command so we can actually look at how many there are. So there's 10 commandlets in that module. So let's take a look at the package sources that we have installed here. So Chocolatey is actually not, it no longer ships in box, but it actually bootstraps the first time you search or try to install something. Like WinRare. WinRare is something I use for creating zip files, at least in the GUI. So what I've done, I've actually, I really don't see a lot of people installing packages that were created by somebody else that are hosted on untrusted repositories from the internet, at least not in a enterprise environment. So what I've done, I've used Visual Studio and I've created my own internal repository. Let's pull that up and show it to you real quick. So this is actually a NuGet repository. You can see we've got WinRare, we've got ImageBurn, we've got Adobe Reader and Zoomit in this repository. So, and it's opened Internet Explorer with PowerShell with no problem and opened up that page. You don't have to point and click to do things like that. But anyway, if you want, Bo Prox, who's also a PowerShell MVP, has a great blog for setting up this an internal repository with Visual Studio. There's a lot of steps to it. So now what we'll do, we'll register that repository, and you'll notice that we actually set it to trusted because it's internal, so of course we trust it. So now we'll get the package sources again, and you'll notice that we called it NuGet. But that's the one that I just created. You'll notice that Chocolatey is actually it's not trusted. So let's find the packages in PowerShell that are on that NuGet server, and you can see it's the same four we saw in the GUI. Well, maybe you don't have Visual Studio. Not everybody has Visual Studio, especially if you're an IT pro, because I'm an IT pro. So there's a product out there called ProGet. And they do have a free version, and you'd have to look at the licensing to know if you could use that or not. I don't work for them, and I'm not representing them, but it's actually a good product. So, and it's much easier to set up than the one I set up with Visual Studio. So I'll show you that one as well. And it has a much prettier GUI also for people who want that. So the OneGet repository, the only package we have in this one is actually Google Chrome. So we'll register that package source. And then we'll go back and get the package sources. So we called that one ProGet, and we have one called NuGet now. So we have two internal repositories. So let's see what's on the ProGet repository. And of course, we just saw Google Chrome is the only one there. So you can find an individual package, and you'll notice we'll specify the source of NuGet. One thing I want to point out is you would think that we search for this, that it would pull up WinRare, but it does not. It's almost like the asterisks are already there inside the coding, because if I search for this next one, it pulls up WinRare, and you'll notice I don't have the W or the trailing R. So keep that in mind if you can't find the package you're looking for. You're also not limited to a single package. You can search for multiple packages at the same time. There's a lot of different parameters with this. And this is not meant to necessarily be an entry-level session. It is somewhat for PowerShell 5, but I'm not going to do a lot of show help and stuff like that. But I do like to point out that in the show window version, you can actually search, and you can also zoom. And what I wanted you to see here is there are a lot of parameters with this commandlet. So I'll show you a list of those parameters, and I want to make this screen a little bit larger so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So you can see there are a number of different parameters for that commandlet. Okay, so get package shows you the packages that are installed on the machine that it's run on. And you'll notice that this is actually Microsoft Silverlight. So you can't see that because it's truncated there, but if we send it to Format Table Auto, it would say Microsoft Silverlight, and that the provider name is MSI. So what I want to show you, I actually am going to show you something in the graphical user interface here. It looks like my resolution is not exactly the way I want it. So let's do this. Bear with me 1 second. Thought I had hidden my taskbar here earlier. Okay. And that's really not important. The only thing I was going to show you is if you go to the Metro interface, that WinRAR is not installed. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and install it. We're just going to run find package, and you can actually pipe that to install package. Now that's not a requirement. You could specify the name with install package, but we'll go ahead and run it because that showing you that in the GUI. You didn't come to this presentation to learn about the GUI anyway. Or hopefully you didn't. So you'll notice that WinRAR is now installed with the install package, and you'll notice this time we'll just use install package instead of finding the package first. I kind of like doing it this way because I can highlight this portion of the command, and I can run it, and I can see that, hey, this is exactly what's going to be installed, and then I can run the entire command, and I know that it's going to install what I just saw. So you're not limited. You're also not limited to installing one package at a time. So we'll go ahead and install a couple more packages. We'll install Image Burn and Zoom It. And once again, I was going to show you that WinRAR was installed, but that's not important. You can see that in the status right here. So we'll go ahead and run get package so you can see all the packages that are installed. You can run get package with a name to see, one package name. You can specify it with multiple package names. So we have a couple of Windows 8 machines. I'm on a machine called PC03. We have 4 and 5. A few modifications have been made to those. By default on Windows 8.1, PowerShell remoting is not enabled, and the execution policy is set to restricted. I've enabled PowerShell remoting and set the execution policy to remote signed. I've also added those 2 repositories that we've already seen. So I want to show you what version of PowerShell is installed on those and make sure we have connectivity. So we have the same build of PowerShell on those. So let's see if there's any packages that were installed with the Chocolatey provider. And although I'm searching for the Chocolatey provider, there's actually multiple repositories that use that provider. Our internal repositories are using that provider. So I can remotely, because this is all well and fine, but you could probably point and click on one machine and install this fairly quickly. But the power is that if I can do this on 2 remote machines, I could do it on 100. So we'll just go ahead and run this. So I want WinRAR to be put on those 2 machines. And I'm going to say make it happen. And it's going to make it happen. And it'll come back here in a second. And you'll notice that WinRAR has been installed on PC 4 and 5. We'll come back to that in just a second. Let's go ahead and let's look at the packages on our local machine again. Uninstall package is how you uninstall one of the packages. So like I was saying before, I can run this part of it. I can see, hey, there's one package there. Then I can run the entire line. And I just uninstalled ZoomIt. So now if I run get package again, you'll notice that ZoomIt's no longer in the list. So it's that easy to install and uninstall packages. So, you know, you have this package source that's called Chocolatey. And that's actually the name of the source that uses the Chocolatey provider, but it points to chocolatey.org website. And you'll notice, so we're talking about the first one in the list here. So maybe you want to prevent somebody from using that one. And that one used to be on a machine by default. That's actually the reason I show this. It's not on there by default, but you can easily unregister that package. And when you get a package source, hey, it's gone. No Chocolatey for you. Something else that's really cool, this almost gives you like a GUI interface in PowerShell. So I can run this command, and you'll notice it'll show me the packages that are on that one of those internal repositories. I can select ZoomIt, I can say OK, and it'll actually install ZoomIt for me. So that's using some of the features of Out-Grid View. So when it's selected, it sends that to install package. So as it says, this is really cool. One thing you'll also notice, there's no, let's go ahead and run this command. There's no commandlet for publishing or creating packages. So that's actually something that somebody who's a developer or something would actually create, because maybe you have a line of business application inside your company and your developer can create a package and put it on an internal repository, and then you can just pull it down and install it, and it'll do all the prerequisites and all that stuff for you and just configure it exactly the way you want it if it's designed properly. So that's where I really see the power of this, that those applications today, I mean, everybody loves PowerShell because it's free, for one thing. It's awesome, but it's also free with Windows. So instead of having to buy an application to manage your software, you could actually use PowerShell in the future for free. So, and here I mention, if you're interested in learning more, you know, they have a meeting every week about OneGet, and I've attended a number of those, and generally they actually they'll tweet out a link to GitHub, their GitHub account, and you can go there and see what the topic's about to see if it's something like they've had several topics that I was very interested in that I attended. So we'll go ahead and close that region. That's it for OneGet. The network switch modules are network switch commandlets in that particular module. There's a number of those, as we saw in PowerPoint earlier. You can see I was right. There's 19 of those commandlets, and those allow you to manage network hardware that support it. And of course, I don't have that hardware, so we won't be demonstrating those, but I wanted to make you aware of those. PowerShell Get is actually one of my favorite features. And this one, if you want to learn more when we're done, I'm actually going to be presenting a session just on PowerShell Get at the PowerShell Summit North America 2015 in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's like April, at the end of April next year. So, that should be very good. So we'll do the same sort of thing here. You can see the commandlets that are part of this this module. There's 8 commandlets. Okay, and what we're doing now, we're actually searching Microsoft's PowerShell gallery. So these are all the ones that's been uploaded to the online gallery. And we'll do a count on that. We'll just see how many there are. So there are 126 PowerShell modules out there, and it's actually limited now to only, kind of like invitation only, PowerShell MVPs can upload to that, but it's not public. At some point, it may be made public. So one of the PowerShell modules that I like to use is the PowerShell Community Extensions. So you can see that that's actually in the repository. And just like with OneGet, you can search for more than one module at a time. And this time I use the verbose parameter. You can use verbose on any of this stuff and get more information about what's going on. The one thing I want to show you there is you're not limited to searching for a single module. And I'll just show you a little tip here that's kind of a beginner tip, but the way I knew that I could search for 2 modules is if you look at the help for this, where it says name, it's got string there and it's got brackets. So those brackets means that it accepts an array of strings. If the brackets weren't there, if it just had string inside the angle braces, then it would only accept a single string. So that's how you know by looking at the help whether you can specify one or more than one value. So Get module actually shows you what's installed on your machine today. And you'll notice I don't have the PowerShell Community Extensions. And Get module is actually not a new commandlet. It's one that's existed forever. So but you'll notice that these new commandlets have a similar naming scheme, you might say, because they're named as module. So if I use find module, that is one of the new commandlets, and I'm actually going to find it, and we've already run this once. So, and then I'm just going to pipe that to install module, and we'll do the verbose parameter so you can see what's going on. So we'll install the PowerShell Community Extensions, and you'll notice that we're receiving this prompt, and this is actually what you would also receive if you installed something from Chocolatey and on the OneGet with OneGet, one of the packages from Chocolatey. Since it's untrusted, it's going to prompt you to say, hey, are you sure you want to install this untrusted software? You'll notice in the header of this, it's from an untrusted whatever, and it's such a low resolution on this machine that we can't see the entire thing. But we'll go ahead and say yes, sure, we trust it. It's probably not something you'd want to install in your production environment, though. And if you didn't want to see the prompt, you could actually specify the force parameter, and it would just say do it and don't tell me about it. So now we'll see our repositories. So there's a PowerShell gallery, and there's another one from Microsoft there. It looks like that is trusted. So one's trusted and one's not trusted. Those are the default ones that ship in the box with the newest version of PowerShell. So now I'll show you that indeed the PowerShell Community Extensions module was installed. It's actually installed in the path that's available to all users. There is a scope parameter on that so that you could install it in the current user instead of the all users, but all users is the default. So let's take a look at our other 2 PCs. Let's see if we have the PowerShell Community Extensions module on those. We don't. And just like the OneGet module, the power of this is being able to run this against multiple machines with PowerShell remoting. So we'll go ahead and install the PowerShell Community Extensions, and this is actually, so it's going to pull that module down from Microsoft on those 2 remote machines. So now we'll verify that they were indeed installed, and they are installed. You'll notice with this one, there's not an uninstall module. So that's something that, you'll just have to clean up yourself. I also created an internal repository with ProGet for this PowerShell Get. So I'll show you that one. And this is actually the same screen that I showed you before, but I called it PS Get instead of the OneGet one. You'll notice we've got a couple of modules out there. So now we'll register this this repository. You'll notice that's a really long line, and here in just a second, I'm going to show you there's no pipe symbols or no commas or anything in this command, so there's no natural line breaks is what I'm getting at. And the backtick, and this is kind of a best practices thing, but the backtick, which can be used as a line continuation character, is an accident waiting to happen, because if you have a space, which of course is invisible after the backtick, then it'll actually break the command. Because what it does, the backtick is an escape character, so it escapes the line break. And if you have a space after it, then you no longer have a line break immediately after it to be escaped. You're trying to escape the space. So let's go ahead and unregister the repository we just created, and that's how you would unregister one. But you can use splatting to make a command narrower. So like in this presentation, I don't want it 50 miles long because it's not on the screen, so I can actually use splatting, and it makes it really narrow. So we accomplish the same thing in one long line or several short lines. So now if we do a get PS repository, you'll notice now we have our PowerShell Get that I actually created, and it exists in my domain. So let's find out, do I have a module called Mr. SQL? I do not. And I'll prefix a lot of my modules with Mr. because my name is Mike Robbins, of course, so it just works out really cool to have Mr. Like, just throw this in here. If you want to go to my blog, I have an alias to my blog that's a lot easier to say and tell people. You can go to mrpowershell.com for Mike Robbins PowerShell, and that'll get you to my blog. So we can see that we have a couple modules out there, you know, the ones we saw in the GUI, but we still don't have the Mr. SQL out there in our repository. So this here is a little prep for the demo. So now you'll notice we have a script module on our local machine, and it's at version 0.0. And the reason that it's actually at that version is when I created this, I didn't create a module manifest. And it's been the best practice forever that you should always create a module manifest with any module that you create, and it contains the metadata about the module, like the version and so on. So let's try to publish that module to this internal repository. Notice we got an error, and it tells us that we got an error because it does not have a module manifest file. So this is a good thing, because the people that weren't following the best practices and creating a module manifest for their script modules, now they're going to be forced to do that. And the people that were following the best practices, then they're in good shape. Okay, so a little more prep for the demo, and all this is doing is renaming some modules I had staged so that it's going to be a different Mr. SQL module. So now if we look at this one, you'll notice it's a version 1.0, so we have a module manifest with this one. And this one's actually created the way that I typically create my module manifest. So when we run this one, we'll still get an error. So even those of us who have been creating module manifest files, we could have an issue because it says in the error that we're missing the required metadata. And with error messages, read the error message, because I can't tell you how many times that people run the same, they'll clear the screen so nobody will see it, and then they'll run the same command like 3 or 4 times expecting different results. And that's kind of like the definition of insanity. So read the error message, because most of the time it's going to tell you exactly what the problem is. So we're missing required metadata. And the problem here is I don't typically put a description in my modules, and that is now a required field. So now we'll a little more prep for the demo, and we'll try to publish the module again. Okay, and you'll notice this time we got another error message. And I want you to notice that the path for this is actually, it has this tilde in it. It has, because I'm logged in as the administrator, so it's trying to use the administrator's profile, and there is actually a bug in the file system provider. So this has nothing to do with PowerShell version 5. It's a bug that's been existing out there for quite a while. You notice this was logged in May of 2014. So the problem is we actually need to set our temporary environment variable to a path that doesn't contain the tilde. So we'll go ahead and set that. Now we can run the same command again, and we won't get the error message. It'll actually publish properly. So now if we do a find module, what we've done is we've published our Mr. SQL module to the internal PowerShell Get repository that we have installed on a web server. So now our coworkers can go out there and do an install module, which we're going to do here in a second, and they can get these modules. So you don't have to tell them, oh, it's here and it's there, and you got to put it in this path, and you got to figure out the PS module path or whatever it is. You don't have to explain that anymore. All they need to do is go and run install module, and even better than that, if you have PowerShell remoting enabled on their machine, you can actually just run remoting and install it for them. So, and there's a little more data behind that, just like with most things in PowerShell. So you can see all the metadata. So this is a little more prep for the demo here. So now we actually don't have the module local. That's what I did. I actually renamed the module so it does not exist on the local machine. So just imagine we're sitting at the coworker's machine now. We can actually run install module, and what we're doing at this time, if that quickly, we pulled the module down and installed it on the local computer from the repository. So if we look, we have that module installed. So a little more prep for the demo. Now you'll notice we actually have the module twice. We have a version 1.1 and a version 1.0. And one exists in the current user's module path, and the other one exists in the all user module path. So the problem that you'll have with that when you actually try to publish that is, hey, it doesn't know which one you want to publish, so it's going to complain about that. So like in this example here, we actually want to publish the 1.1, the updated one, to the repository. So we told it which one that time, so it published with no problem at all. So now if we do a find module from our repository, you'll notice it shows version 1.1, but what happened to our version 1.0 that we put in the repository? If you wanted to see that one, you would have to use the required version parameter, and it would, you see the version 1.0 is out there, so you can still get the old version, but you would have to specify it. And I kind of like that because it hides that from somebody who's not so PowerShell savvy, that generally you're going to want them to get the latest version unless they know enough to know that, hey, there might be a different version available. So a little more prep for the demo. So you'll notice now what we have on the local computer, we're at the coworker's computer, and we have version 1.0, and he needs to update to version 1.1. And that is as easy as running an update module and giving it the name, and we're going to specify verbose so you can see it happen. So once you've run that, you'll notice now we've got version 1.1 on the local machine. Also created a repository with Visual Studio for PowerShell Get. And we'll see what's in there. So we've got a couple of modules in there, and the other one actually has the Mr. SQL in there now. So I think I'm going to skip over this stuff here. This is actually, you can see it if you make an OData connection. You can see more information about those modules, like how many times it's been downloaded and that sort of stuff. This OData module is something that Jim Christopher, who's also a PowerShell MVP, created, and I'll provide the code if that's something you're interested in taking a look at. So let's see if there's anything else here. So I think that's it for and we're in the demo folder already, so let's go ahead and close out that region. Because I really want to show you some of the other features. And once again, I'm making sure that, hey, we're in the demo folder. So what we're going to do now, we're going to actually compress everything that's in this demo folder, and we're going to put it in an archive.zip file on the desktop. So we just created a zip file on the desktop of this machine right here that contains all that information. I think what has happened here, let's see. Okay, and what we'll do, we'll create a directory on the desktop that's called archive. So that's a folder we created, and let's just extract the contents of that zip file. Excuse me. Okay, so another new feature is you can now debug jobs. So you notice we have a job running. Let it run for a second. It actually got a counter that's going to count up to 120. So when you run debug job and give it the job name, you'll actually notice you're in debug mode. And if you don't know what the commands are here, you can actually do a question mark. It'll tell you what the commands are. Like C is what we're going to end up doing for continue. But you can debug that job. So if we want to take a look at the I variables, so it's done 10 iterations. So this might be something that you have an issue with, and maybe it's going to run till it gets to 1,000,000, and you don't want to have 1,000,000 iterations. So you could change I to like 115, since it's going to go to 120. So then you'll notice that now I is 115. So we can use the C as we saw before to continue, and you'll notice now it's going to iterate just a few more times. So it's very helpful for troubleshooting. Okay, so we can see the job information, and this part of it here is not new, and we'll go ahead and receive that job, and we'll notice that we jumped from iteration 10 to 116. Okay, now we're to the get item property, and it's actually the commandlet is get item property value, the new one. So at one time, and I know this line is a little bit long here, but if you wanted to, we really want the version of the .NET framework on this machine, and we're basically querying the registry to get that. So it will give you all this information, but all I want is the version. So you can actually expand the property, and you could get what I want. But that's another step. You can also use this this dotted notation style, since it's only one property, and you could get the same thing. But sometimes that's a lot of trouble. So with the get item property value, it actually just goes straight to it. You'll notice I'm not expanding the property. I'm not having to use the dotted notation method. So it's a shortcut, and it's what I was talking about earlier. Convert from string, as I said earlier, this could be something that could be an entire presentation on its own. There's some great information out on blogs on the internet, and also from Lee Holmes, who actually, as my understanding, created this commandlet. So I would recommend taking a look at some of the blogs he's written on the, I think he's got some out there on the PowerShell team blog. So I'll go ahead, and you can actually parse text with this really easy. So I'll actually parse this IIS log file. So you'll notice I can get some data out of that very easily without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. So now I want to show you a little bit of the new DSC features. We'll go ahead and define a configuration. We'll notice that that configuration is defined. So we'll create a mod file for our SQL server. And new DSC checksum has a what if and a confirm parameter now. So that was what if, and also you'll have a confirm, and we'll just say no. And you have to create a checksum if you're using a pool server. So that's where that comes in handy. So let's check to see if the multipath IO feature is enabled on our SQL 01 machine. And you'll notice installed is false, so it is not installed. Also check the iSCSI service to see if it's set to automatic and see if it's running. And it is not. It's in a stop state and it's set to manual. So that's actually what this DSC configuration is going to do. It's actually going to install that Windows feature, and it's going to configure the service the way we want it configured. So go ahead and run that. It'll finish fairly quickly. So with test DSC configuration, used to the information you could get back from that was you notice we got one warning, and that was just telling us to enable Windows updates because we added a feature. So with test DSC checksum, you would just get a true or false back with PowerShell version 4. This detailed parameter is new in version 5. So you'll notice we'll get detailed information back. And you can actually expand these properties and get more information from it. And this will be a good example here that let's check the service, the iSCSI service. You can see it is configured properly, but we're gonna change it so that it's not configured properly. So when we test the DSC configuration, see, normally it would just tell you false. So you don't know if you've got 50 things you configured, you don't know which one of them is not configured properly or if it's everything. So that's what the detail parameter does for you. And you'll notice when you run this, you really don't see anything. You don't see the problem. So if you expand the resources not in desired state property, then that'll actually tell you exactly what the problem is. So you'll notice that it's the iSCSI service that is that is false for the desired state. And to fix that, of course, we can just rerun our configuration and we test it again. And of course, now it's in the desired state. So and there's many other DSC features. There's too many to cover in this session. We are limited on the time we have for this session, so we'll go ahead and move on. Register scheduled job actually has a run every parameter now. And one thing I want to show you here, this will generate an error, but maybe I don't know what kind of value to specify for run every. So you can actually just run this and say, hey, go ahead and generate your error. But it tells you in the error message, specify a parameter type of system.time span. So that gives us a clue, and then what we can do, we can actually run get command and find out all the commandlets that actually create that object type. So, and there's only two. So we've got a measure command and we've got a new time span. So it's a 50-50 guess, but my money's on the new time span. So I actually want to set up a scheduled task to run every day is what this does. So, and then you can take a look at that. The interval is every 1 day. And if you went, you could look at this in the GUI as well. And these jobs that you'll create with PowerShell, which is, the jobs themselves are not a new feature in PowerShell 5. That was actually added with PowerShell version 3. So you'll notice the trigger is repeat task every 1 day. So we're going to skip down here a little bit. Here's the skip last. So I had actually exported a list of packages from Chocolatey at one time. We'll get a count on that. We've actually got 1,893 packages in that text file, a list of them. So we can actually run get content, and we can skip the last 1,885. So that only shows a fraction of them. And there are certain scenarios where you would want to use this. So let's move on to this is one of my favorite ones here, the no wait parameter for stop service. I'm sure that we've all tried to stop these services on machines, and we get a screen full of these things that we're waiting. And of course, we could run that as a job, and we get our command prompt back immediately. But sometimes we're running it interactively, and we can't do whatever it is we want to do until these services are stopped, so we have to wait. So that's where the no wait actually, it'll give your prompt back immediately, even though the service is not stopped. So it is very similar to running it in a job as I see it. So let's go ahead and start that service again. Now, one thing I noticed, they're probably going to have to put it in a separate parameter set than some of these other parameters, because we all know that pass-through should display what it did. It should, so when I use the no wait, you'll actually notice I didn't get any feedback from that command, even though I specified pass-through. And there's kind of a reason for that. So we'll give it just a second here, and we'll restart this service. So I typically wouldn't put commands like format table inside of a script block, but we're going to do it this way because I want you to see the problem. So you'll notice that I stopped the service with no wait, and I immediately ran get service, and I used format table so you could see what's going on. But even though it still stopped pending as the status, it gave us our command prompt back. So that is a nice little feature where you can run that just interactively at the command prompt without having to put it into a job to get your prompt back immediately. Okay, and we're approaching the end of the presentation here, but I do have another PowerPoint slide that I want to share with you. Update help has a what if parameter in PowerShell 5, and also it has a confirm parameter. So we'll say no for this one, and we'll say no for this one. So those are helpful as well. There are many other features in PowerShell version 5, because they actually had an April release, a May release, they had a July experimental release, and then they had a September release, and they had a November release. So if you happen to be running a different version, all this may not exist. And in the latest release, there's even more features. I will tell you that some of the commandlets and parameters, the names and different things have changed. And that's one of the reasons you don't want to use this in production, and you don't want to write scripts that are dependent on this, because the names of what you're depending on could change. So the only thing I have left in here is actually I have a presentation cleanup, which goes through and it deletes everything that I've done, and it resets this demo environment back to pristine so I can run the same demo again. So each time I would write a command to do something, I would go in here, and you'll notice I have this region for, if I just ran the OneGet demo, then it would undo everything that I did, and so on for the PowerShell Get, and for everything else. So, and it even sets the zone back to 100 and so on. So just to give you an idea, if you're presenting something and you're going to do it multiple times so that you don't have to rebuild or worry about snapshots and all that sort of stuff, you can just write one command to do something and then immediately write another command to undo it. Okay, let's jump back to our PowerPoint presentation. And the last slide I have is actually contact info. So the official website of my blog is mikefrobbins.com. You can also get there with the alias of MrPowerShell.com. A lot of people ask me, hey, you know, I thought maybe Jeffrey Snover was Mr. PowerShell. And the reason I have that, my initials, you know, MR for Mike Robbins. So I thought that was pretty cool. On Twitter, and I kind of have the identity of Mike F Robbins at all the different sites I use. So on Twitter, I have Mike F Robbins. The leader and co-founder of the Mississippi PowerShell user group. So there's our website, and our we have an alias for it that's MissPowerShell.com. So I'll say, yeah, I have Mr. and Mrs. PowerShell. But the state abbreviation for Mississippi is MS. So that's how we got that. And on Twitter, the user group is the same. You know, I'm a big believer in personal branding, so I try to brand everything the same way. I have a new book out, the Windows PowerShell TFM 4th edition, which is on PowerShell version 4. It's published by Sapient Technologies. So you can go out to their website and find it, or you can find it on Amazon.com. Me and Jason Helmick actually co-authored that book. I'm also author of a chapter of in the PowerShell Deep Dives book. I wrote chapter 6 in that book. And there's a lot of different authors like Don Jones and Jeff Hicks and so on. I think there's about 24 different authors of that book. And the really neat thing about the PowerShell Deep Dives, it's considered to be a book that's a conference in a book. So you have different chapters that you can pick up the book, and if you want to know something about writing a PowerShell that creates HTML, Jonathan Med actually has a chapter on that. You can read that one chapter. You don't have to read any of the rest of the book. And it's just like sitting through his session on that topic. So it's very, each chapter is independent of the other is what I'm getting at. And also all of the author proceeds of that book go to Save the Children's Charities. So none of the authors got paid. We all donated our time. And I think that's it. I'll just give you a couple more additional resources. Hopefully everybody here has heard of the Hey Scripting Guy blog by Ed Wilson is the Hey Scripting Guy. He has guest bloggers who actually blog a lot for him, but great content there. PowerShell Magazine, another great website for PowerShell content, and also PowerShell.org. If you have a question or something, they have really good forums, and you can definitely get quick feedback on PowerShell specific questions there. And they're the ones that are also hosting the PowerShell Summit next year in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I think that's it at this point.
So Mike, thank you. It's a really wonderful presentation. So, are you going to the one in Europe too for the PowerShell Summit?
No, Europe's a bit far from me, and
okay.
I spent 2 years in Nuremberg, Germany, in the military. So I've been to Europe, and it's a great place to visit. I would love to go. My sister, matter of fact, she was living and working for a couple of years in London, England, and I would have liked to have visited her while she was living there, but I just couldn't do it. I have three children, and being married and all, it's a lot more difficult when you have 5 people to try to go somewhere, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
And if I went without them, I might as well pack my bags and not come back, you know.
Okay, that's interesting. Really, I really want to be there in for PowerShell Summit North America, but I don't think at a point of time, whatever it is, I wouldn't know what would happen, tied on to work. But the one thing good is that the PowerShell Summit is recorded, right? So for
Yeah.
audience that couldn't make it there, you could easily get access um to the video, for people in
Yes,
yeah.
that's correct. They had some like amateur type recordings of the first two, and then the first one they did in Europe, which was earlier this year, they actually had some professional equipment. So I think those recordings are probably a lot better. And locally, I've actually been to all of them in North America. I've been to the the past this year, earlier this year and last year, the two, there's been two, and they've both been in Seattle. So I've been to both of those. And actually, the facility that they're going to be held at in Charlotte, North Carolina, I've been to a PowerShell Saturday there.
Uh-huh. Okay, so any question from the ground? Any question for Mike? Okay, well, okay, Dexter. Oh, Mike, you gotta see what Dexter typed, man.
Hey, that's great. I appreciate it. And one thing I'll tell you is we've only touched the tip of the iceberg with PowerShell 5 in this presentation.
Yeah.
That you could probably have a PowerShell Summit on nothing but version 5. One thing I didn't mention in the presentation is classes. Classes are a new feature as well. It's a feature I really haven't had time to experiment with, but it's something that there are also a lot of blogs on that, and it's worth researching, and you could probably do a presentation just on that topic. That's great to hear, and there's going to be another scripting games next year. I really don't have anything to announce today, but there is work being done to hold another series of scripting games.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Mike, really thank you for taking your time off on a Friday evening to present.
No problem at all. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you again.
Thank you, guys, and have a nice day where you guys are at. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.